There's a certain kind of person who, after a long social event, a party, a work gathering, maybe even a family dinner, doesn't feel relieved that it went well. They feel relieved that it's over, not because they don't care about people, not because they're angry or cold or broken in some way, just because something inside them quietly exhales the moment they're alone again. The door closes, the noise stops, and for the first time in hours, they feel like themselves. Most people around them don't understand that. To an outsider, leaving early looks like rejection. Keeping a small circle looks like arrogance. Not posting about your life looks like you have something to hide. And staying quiet in a room full of loud opinions looks like you have nothing to say. But that's not what's happening at all. There's a label that gets placed on people like this: reserved, antisocial, boring, even mysterious, in a suspicious way. Like the privacy itself is a red flag. Like someone who doesn't want to be seen must be hiding something shameful. Society has a strange relationship with visibility. It rewards exposure. It trusts loudness. It equates sharing with honesty and silence with secrecy. And so, for a long time, people who naturally gravitate toward privacy have been made to feel like something is wrong with them, like they're withholding, like they need to open up more, share more, be more. What's rarely talked about is what's actually going on inside people like this. Because it isn't emptiness, it isn't fear, not always, and it definitely isn't a lack of depth. In fact, the psychology of people who value privacy over popularity is one of the most misunderstood patterns in human behavior, and there's far more going on beneath the surface than most people ever realize. Psychologists have spent decades studying what they call self-disclosure, the human tendency to share personal information with others. And what the research consistently shows is that self-disclosure isn't just a social habit. It's tied to identity, to trust, and most importantly, to nervous system regulation. For some people, being known widely feels like safety. For others, being known selectively feels like safety. Neither is wrong. They're just different systems responding to the same fundamental need to feel secure. Research in neuroscience has shown that the brain's reward circuitry responds differently in different people when it comes to social recognition. For some individuals, public acknowledgement activates dopamine pathways strongly. The likes, the attention, the validation it registers as a genuine neurological reward. It feels good in a very physical way. For others, that same attention activates a mild stress response instead. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, picks up on visibility not as reward, but as risk. Not because something is wrong, but because the nervous system has been calibrated differently. This calibration isn't random. It develops over time, and it almost always traces back to early experience. Think about what a child learns when they share something vulnerable, and it gets dismissed, or laughed at, or used against them later, or shared with someone else without permission. The lesson the nervous system takes from that isn't sharing is risky with this person. The lesson is broader than that. It becomes being seen is unpredictable, and unpredictable things can hurt you. So the system adapts. It learns to be selective, to protect what's personal, to reserve the inner life for spaces and people that have proven to be safe. This isn't a decision. It's not a philosophy someone consciously chose. It's a pattern that forms quietly, over years, through repeated experience. And by the time that child becomes an adult, privacy doesn't feel like a strategy anymore. It just feels like who they are. Psychologists sometimes describe this through the lens of attachment theory. People who grew up in environments where emotional disclosure led to vulnerability, where opening up had unpredictable consequences, often develop what researchers call a self-protective relational style. It doesn't mean they don't want connection. It means they've learned to build connections slowly, carefully, and deliberately. Deep rather than wide. Quiet rather than performed. And what looks from the outside like distance is often, on the inside, the most deliberate form of intimacy they know how to offer. It's important to say clearly this isn't better or worse than being someone who thrives on openness and visibility. There's no moral high ground here. Some people process life by externalizing it by talking, sharing, receiving feedback from others. That's a completely valid and deeply human way of being. Others process life internally first. They think before they speak. They feel before they share. They trust the inner world as the primary source of understanding. Neither style is more evolved. They're different orientations, shaped by different histories, running on different nervous systems. What matters is recognizing which one you are and understanding why, instead of spending energy trying to become something the world told you that you should be. Here's where it gets interesting. People who value privacy often carry a quiet paradox inside them that they can't quite name. They want to be understood deeply, genuinely understood, but they also feel an almost instinctive resistance to being fully visible. They want closeness, but on their own terms. Connection, but without the performance of connection. And so they sometimes find themselves in a strange position, deeply known by almost no one, not because they have nothing to offer, but because the bar for entry is high. That bar isn't arrogance, it's discernment. It's the result of having learned, sometimes painfully, that not everyone deserves access to the real you. That attention and care are not the same thing. That someone can be watching you closely and still not see you at all. The hidden strength in this is real. People who guard their inner world tend to develop a rich inner life, because when you don't constantly externalize your thoughts and feelings, you develop a deeper relationship with them. You sit with things longer. You think them through more fully. You arrive at self-knowledge that many people, always moving, always sharing, never quite reach. But there's also a quiet cost, and it's worth naming honestly. When privacy becomes the default setting for everything, when it's not just a preference but a reflex, it can create a kind of invisible distance from even the people you trust. You might notice it in moments when someone who loves you says, "I never know what's going on with you," not because you're being dishonest, just because the habit of keeping things close is so practiced, so automatic, that even when it's safe to open, the door stays shut anyway. Not from fear exactly, just from muscle memory. Recognizing that distinction between chosen privacy and reflexive protection is one of the most honest things a person can do with themselves. If any of this is landing somewhere real for you, it's worth sitting with what it actually means. Not that you need to change, not that you need to become more visible, or share more, or stop guarding what's yours, but just that the way you move through the world quietly, selectively, with depth rather than breadth, is not a malfunction. It is not aloofness. It is not fear dressed up as preference, or at least not only that. It is a coherent response to a world that taught you, early and often, that being seen is something you have to earn the right to do safely. And the fact that you haven't abandoned that instinct entirely, that some part of you still knows the difference between being watched and being known, is not something to fix. It's something to understand. The people in your life who have made it past that quiet threshold, the ones you've actually let in, they know something about you that the world doesn't. And that asymmetry, that choice, that careful rationing of access that is its own kind of power, not the loud kind, not the kind that gets applauded in rooms full of strangers, the kind that lasts, the kind that means something. You are not closed off, you are careful. And there is a profound difference between the two, even if most people never take the time to notice it. If this felt like something you recognized in yourself, there's more worth exploring. Because the way you relate to privacy usually connects to something deeper, the way you handle trust, the way you experience belonging, the way you've learned to protect yourself without meaning to keep everyone out. Those are patterns worth understanding, not to dismantle them, but to see them clearly. Because when you can finally see the shape of how you work, you stop fighting yourself, and that is where something real begins to shift.